Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Monday, April 27th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. On today's episode, in our box office segment, Variety's Rebecca Rubin breaks down the record-setting opening for Lionsgate's musical biopic Michael, and Mark Malkin brings us a Just for Variety report on Madonna's visit to the Abbey in West Hollywood. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines that you need to know. 2 days later, it's still hard to believe. The White House Correspondents' Dinner was another disturbing example of the collision of mental illness, firearms, and a cultural environment that turns all political debate and policy differences into issues of good versus evil. What kind of psychosis drives a man to plan such a deliberate attack as we saw unfold at the White House Correspondents' Dinner at the Washington Hilton on Saturday night? Thank the universe that no one was seriously hurt, and enormous gratitude to the law enforcement officers and first responders for their enduring service day after day, night after night. We need a reckoning on mental illness in this country. I strongly believe that media and entertainment has a role to play in facilitating a conversation about mental illness. I believe strongly that media has a role to play in taking the temperature down in national politics. We now live in a media world where anyone can connect to anyone at any time. I truly hope the brightest minds in the entertainment and media world take up the challenge of addressing what has become our single biggest social problem. Variety has been covering what happened at the Correspondents' Dinner since we saw the first signs of commotion in the ballroom, and we'll keep covering as narratives of the night emerge from the thousands of journalists who were in the room. The event, designed to celebrate journalism, turned into a moment for reporters to rise to the occasion and do their jobs. All of our coverage and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. If it's Monday, we're talking box office with Rebecca Rubin, Variety's senior film and media reporter and our terrific box office analyst. Rubin is a savvy judge of box office potential, and she has known for 2 years that Michael was going to make a splash. Rebecca Rubin, thank you again for joining me to talk about the box office, and there's a lot to talk about this week.
There is.
I know that the film industry is very pleasantly surprised by Michael emerging as a very big hit, a 4-quadrant blockbuster. Rebecca, what do you think made this movie open so strongly?
This was just a crowd pleaser. When it landed on tracking services about a month ago, it looked like it was going to have an opening weekend around 50 million to 60 million, which would have been a great start, if not even a record. Before this, the record for a biopic opening weekend was Straight Outta Compton in 2015, which opened to 60 million. And so that range would have been a great number for a movie like Michael. But just in the weeks leading up, as Lionsgate was really ramping up its marketing campaign, those numbers kept ticking up, and advanced sales were climbing, and it ended up opening to $97 million domestically and then $217 million globally, which is blockbuster numbers for a film that is not hailing from a major franchise. And of course, it's about one of the biggest performers of all time, but that is rare to get this kind of an opening weekend. And so definitely Lionsgate is popping some champagne bottles right about now.
Your story details it so well. 2015, Straight Outta Compton, 60 million. 2018, the great Freddie Mercury and Queen biopic Bohemian Rhapsody, 51 million domestically. Like, even the most successful musical biopics haven't really been up there in the blockbuster, with this at $100 million domestically and then another, $100 million and change globally. It's pretty astounding. But you have had your eye on this for a while. You had a hunch that this was going to do well.
I did, because we saw early footage of this movie at CinemaCon in 2024. That was when this movie was originally going to come out in 2025. It looked like it was playing as a greatest hits film, and it reminded me a lot of a film like Bohemian Rhapsody, which really leaned heavily on recreating these thrilling concert sequences, and it makes it a fun experience for the viewer to watch in an auditorium with great sound and great visuals, and it makes it fun to watch with other people. So by leaning heavily on recreating performances of songs that people love, it just makes for a fun experience in the theater. A lot of critics took issue with the fact that Michael is a very sanitized approach to the life of Michael Jackson. It ends before he was ever accused of child sexual abuse, and so people feel like it's leaving out a very important part of his life. But for audiences, I think that the end result ended up being the most crowd-pleasing version of this film. Given the fact that it has really strong audience scores, it looks like it's going to have a long life in theaters. And I spoke this morning to Lionsgate's motion picture chair, Adam Fogelson, and he was saying that you don't deliver this kind of opening weekend number unless you are catering to every conceivable demographic. Or just the fact that his music, Michael Jackson's music, really does appeal to everybody. And the people who have gone out to see it have been embracing that.
It was a constant, really, in the last 15 years of his career, when those serious child molestation allegations started to surface in kind of the early to mid-90s. It was an absolute cloud on his career, and there has been a consistent debate about art and artists, and Michael Jackson is constantly mentioned because he created some of the most indelible, some of the most influential pop music of the century, and then went into a phase of his life when he himself was just a very strange and enigmatic person. He made it hard to be a fan of his. This movie is very much an indication that the time has passed, and people want to remember the Michael Jackson of him on top. And when he was at his absolute peak, from rising through the Jackson 5 to the absolute peak of his solo career, there was no bigger star on the planet. And it's, some people will say it's very convenient to draw the curtain at the late 80s and not have to deal with the difficult stuff. And for all of what I just said, the audience has spoken. People are enjoying this. Rebecca, I gotta believe exhibitors are thrilled to have this kind of foot traffic.
They are, because it's been a strong start to the spring, and momentum begets momentum. That is a saying that exhibitors are constantly repeating, and it's been a pretty positive stretch. We had hits like Project Hail Mary, which is still drawing in major audiences, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and even the drama, the A24 movie that has been an art house hit. These are all in very different genres, bringing in different audiences. And so they were not dusting off the cobwebs to welcome audiences for Michael. People have been going to theaters, and it's just continuing off of that momentum. It looks like it's going to continue next weekend when The Devil Wears Prada 2 opens.
From a business perspective, Michael is a joint venture between Universal, which has the international distribution, Lionsgate, which has domestic, and the Michael Jackson estate, which all put money into it. And as your story notes, this has a pretty hefty budget, but it, even just based on this opening, it looks like they're going to be pretty good. What do you think gave them the confidence to put that kind of money, which you say is very high for a biopic, into this movie?
It is. So Lionsgate had originally greenlit the film for roughly $150 million, which then right there would have been one of the most expensive musical biopics. A lot of that is because it's very expensive to get the rights to songs, and then they're recreating a lot of the songs, and so costs a lot of money. They ended up having to spend tens of millions more when they had to redo the third act of the film because they had to cut out all of the mentions of the child sexual assault allegations that they were legally not allowed to include. So it ended up being a very expensive endeavor, but because it is skewed into a crowd-pleasing film that incorporated a lot of performance footage and everything that just kind of makes it enjoyable to watch with an audience. It's already paying off for all of the parties involved, just given how much it's made in its opening weekend and how those numbers are expected to continue to climb. One of the things, though, that did encourage them, the estate in particular, into feeling like audiences were going to get behind this film is the Broadway musical that opened in 2022 and actually was on a national tour the following year. And that show also ends before the 93 allegations. And it's one of 4 new musicals on Broadway since the pandemic that is still running. It's grossed over $300 million at the Broadway box office. And so the popularity of that show is one of the things that gave the estate the confidence that the public would be willing to embrace a movie about Michael Jackson, especially one that provides a more sympathetic look and is not a warts and all story. And another thing that was actually quite popular as well is there's a Cirque du Soleil show with Michael Jackson's music. And then there was a concert film, This Is It, which came out in 2009. And until the Taylor Swift Eras Tour documentary, it was actually the highest grossing concert film of all time. And so there were actually a lot of data points that showed that even though, like you said, he's one of the main drivers of the conversation of can we separate the art from the artist, people seem to be engaging with projects around his work.
Now that you mention it, it reminds me, Jackson was in rehearsals for This Is It. It was meant to be kind of a comeback film about him, and when he passed, he was in heavy-duty rehearsals, and he was on all kinds of medications because he was trying to get himself up for this movie that was going to be followed by a tour. Oh my God, it all comes back. Rebecca, anything else about this weekend's box office performance you want to point out? Anything else stand out to you?
Well, for the critics who feel like Michael was a more sanitized look at his life, Lionsgate has hinted quite heavily that they expect to make at least one more film about Michael Jackson. At the end of this film, spoiler alert, the words "his story continues" appear on screen. And so their hope is that if this movie is commercially successful, which it is already proving to be, they hope to mine more of his story for future films. And whether that will include some of the darker aspects of his life is unclear. We don't know what direction these films will go in, but there is a possibility that they are going to try to continue this story. So we have not seen a lot of sequels to musical biopics, and so it would be interesting to see how they would navigate that, if it would be as successful as this one. But it's something that they appear to be very heavily considering. And Lionsgate thinks that 30% of the material that ended up being scrapped could be repurposed for a future film. So maybe that ends up cutting a bit of the budget for the next one because they have some of the material already shot.
I think between the fact that they already have stuff in the digital can and the fact that this opens so huge, it pretty much guarantees that we will see more. My other point of curiosity about next weekend is, will people dress up? Will Devil Wears Prada 2 being a sequel? This movie has a fandom, and so I really am wondering if you might see some Mirandas and if you'll see a wave of cerulean at the box office next weekend. I'm curious, what is your sense about that movie?
First of all, I am one of the Loud and Proud fans. I think the first movie is pretty much perfect. And I would not be surprised if people are treating the movie theaters like a runway next weekend when The Devil Wears Prada 2 comes out. They're going to be wearing fun outfits. And I don't think it'll have an opening as big as Barbie, but I think it's going to be a big moment for women moviegoers. And what we've seen, even with a movie like Michael, having a communal experience is really what is drawing people to theaters these days. And so I think it will be a fun moment if people are able to dress up. The popcorn bucket for this film is shaped like a purse. And so that, I think, is an indication that fashion is going to be a big part of opening weekend. And I think that is going to contribute to what people are expecting to be a very, very big weekend.
And these are the kinds of things that, once again, world please experiences you can only get at the movie theater. Awesome. Well, great to have some good news to report. And thank you, Rebecca, as always, for doing the watching for us. We will check in with you this time next week on The Devil Wears Prada 2.
Thank you.
And now we turn to Mark Malkin for a special Madonna-themed Just for Variety report. Only in West Hollywood, kids. Only in West Hollywood.
Thanks, Cynthia. Madonna made an epic surprise appearance Saturday night at West Hollywood LGBTQ bar and nightclub, The Abbey. The invite-only event was billed as Club Confessions Los Angeles. The festivities also served as a birthday party for the Abbey's owner, Tristan Shoecraft. While Madonna wasn't announced in advance, let me tell you, word of her appearance spread throughout the previous days and nights, with social media flooded with the rumor. Doors opened at 9 p.m., but true to form, the Queen of Pop was a very late arrival. She joined producer Stuart Price, he's the producer behind both her Confessions albums, in the DJ booth at about 1 a.m.
Hello, children. Mother is here to save you. Are you ready to dance for me? Come on, meet me on the dance floor. All right, let's go, gays. Come on. So many down, gays. Gay for the gays.
Bold-faced names I spotted in the crowd included Addison Rae, Julia Fox, Lily Allen, CAA's Kevin Huvane, and RuPaul's Drag Race stars Simone and Eureka O'Hara. The crowd went wild as soon as Price played the first chords of Madonna's 2005 hit Hung Up from the first Confessions album. The Material Girl set lasted for about 30 minutes, but not before she wished a happy birthday to Shoecraft.
Want to pull his pants down and spank him?
While Shoecraft kept his clothes on, Madonna did spank him on his rear end while she and the crowd sang Happy Birthday. Madonna urged the packed house to continue celebrating.
All right, guys, take your clothes off and dance. Let's do it. That's my new motto.
Confessions 2 is set for release July 3rd. For more Madonna at the Abbey, including plenty of videos, check out my column Just for Variety at Variety.com.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. House of the Dragon returns for Season 3 on June 12th. HBO released the first teaser this morning. Season 3 of Netflix's Enola Holmes comes on July 1st. Millie Bobby Brown is back playing Sherlock's equally brilliant younger sister. Let's not forget that the Turner Classic Movies Festival begins April 30th in Hollywood. Jane Fonda will be on hand on opening night for the screening of 1967's Barefoot in the Park. That was the great rom-com that she co-starred in with the late Robert Redford. It should be an emotional night. The festival runs through May 3rd. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to Sophie Jones. She's been named CEO of the UK's Royal Television Society. Jones previously worked as Chief Strategy Officer for BPI, and before that she was Head of Corporate Relations for Channel 4. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Rebecca Rubin and Mark Malkin. Sticks, nicks, hick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.